Hello and welcome back to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. This week's sentencing to death of 683 people appears to be challenging Egypt's key international allies. In a speech made yesterday, US Secretary of State John Kerry confirmed his support of the interim government, but added that the recent decision by an Egyptian court to hand down these death sentences to supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood posed, as he put it, challenges for all of us. Kerry's statement follows an announcement by the Obama administration last week that it would partly resume military aid to Egypt 6 months after cutting off the assistance in the wake of President Mohamed Morsi's ouster. So why does the international community appear to be turning a blind eye to this severe crackdown in Egypt? With me in the studio to discuss this are Tamar Bagat, a political and legal analyst, Dr. Wafik Mustafa, chairman of Britain's Conservative Arab Network and author of the just published book, Egypt, the Elusive Arab Spring. And on Skype, we're joined by Mohammed Sudan, UK spokesman for Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. Well, before we come to the Kerry reaction and the rather mixed messages coming from Washington, I just want to focus on the banning of the April the 6th youth movement, because in the first half of the program we talked mainly about the sentencing to death of Muslim Brotherhood supporters. But the April the 6th movement is entirely secular. It's young people. They were in the vanguard of the movement to create new civil society organizations to bring about democracy. I mean, why on earth is General Sisi allowing that organization to be banned?
I think when you go back, the real battle was between the seculars and the army and Muslim Brotherhood on one side, because they were used as a vehicle to remove Mubarak and his son. But once it's been accomplished, the real talk about future government was between the military and Muslim Brotherhood, and the seculars were excluded, including Baradei, Maher and the other young people. If you notice from the start, actually they were excluded. It was between Muslim Brotherhood or political Islam and military. Until today, the equation has not changed much. They have co-opted al-Baradei for several weeks, and he quickly was outside. So even removing Mubarak and appointing the first government after Mubarak was moved was basically all the Mubarak figures were recycled or repackaged again.
But General Sisi is trying to have an election which he wants to say, that he's going to be voted by the people and so on. Well, then how do you ban a huge organization that represents secular, liberal, younger people when you're trying to have a democratic election? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's I'll split the question in two. I think, generally speaking, I'm not in a position to say that there's substantiated evidence to say, General Sisi is the one who's after the ban in and of itself. I think it goes back to your earlier question, which is the judiciary politicized and therefore trying to either please or is being instructed to behave the way they do? With the April 6th movement, it's a fairly flat organization. It's horizontally controlled. There isn't much of a hierarchy. The judgment came out from a court called the Limited Jurisdiction Court, which is meaningless because they're actually not allowed to hear cases that have to do with the formulations of organizations in and of itself. So they actually don't have standing to come out with the judgment that they did, which then begs the question, why did they? Which I don't know. And but then when you look at it as well, part of the judgment is they must close all their offices and no longer be in function. Now, the interesting thing is that most of their offices are actually those of individuals or, just your normal coffee shops all around the city. So it even shows a lack of understanding of what the organization actually is. The way I look at the judgment is just more of a message that, it's not about being Muslim Brotherhood, it's not about being secular.
So it's not a binding judgment?
It's not a binding judgment at all. It's actually,
So
irrelevant.
why does it have it all together?
Because
why does it have a court if it's not a binding judgment? It's not a theater, is it?
No, it's not the matter of it's a theater. The judge basically decided that he does have standing to listen to it, but he actually doesn't because it's brought to the wrong court. And he just decided, well, under my authority I can. Now, obviously, it will be appealed and remanded as well, or it may be completely thrown out and not even remanded. And this is the same court as well that came out and said, a while back that the Muslim Brotherhood organization needs to be dismantled which never came out as a complete judgment in and of itself again, partially because the lack of standing. So then this just basically shows, are there several judges or a handful or more than a handful of judges that are out of line or are proactively trying to be political from the bench? Yes, there are. The reasons behind them, I think, there's just theories all over the place, none of which have completely been substantiated. The concept of telephone justice in Egypt has always been heard about, since Nasser's era.
So there's no justice system, really, what you say?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you bring things to the wrong court and judgments are being passed, one needs to peel down further and know where the judgments are coming out before you run to the media and then, conclusions are drawn.
Let's come on to the issue of the international response. I want to ask Mohammed Sudan, what do you think about the American response? On the one hand, to be mildly critical of these judgments. On the other hand, to say they're going to resume aid and sending helicopters, Apache helicopters, to the Egyptian military. I mean, are you very disappointed with the American reaction to what's going on?
I'm really disappointed from the Americans since the 3rd of July, because since that time, my point of view is they are the main player in the military coup in Egypt. And whatever the coup or the pushes do in Egypt, they are satisfied. Maybe the way they are acting or their function, maybe they are not satisfied, but generally they still aid, they still support the military coup. They still never stop all the aid to the officers or the military in Egypt, because they have their own benefits of have a good relationship with the Egyptian army. And this kind of, it's just a propaganda. What am I saying is just propaganda, but anyway, they are generally support the coup, support the military coup, support all these people, even all Egyptian people being killed, but they still have their advantage, their benefits, no problem for them.
Well, what about the European Union? I mean, Catherine Ashton, the foreign policy chief, did visit President Morsi in prison twice, I think. I mean, do you think the EU is being a little bit better and less supportive of the current government than the Americans are?
I'm still really wondering from most of the European countries and the international community keep silent about these kind of massacres happening in Egypt. Not only for this court, the court going to kill or sentenced to death for 700 something right now, but there are 2,600 people being killed in the massacres in few hours, just in few hours. They keep silent, and every day we have a massacre, bloodshed in Egypt, they still keep silent. Then I believe that most of the international community are satisfied about this. They don't want a democracy in Egypt. Now justice is being killed in Egypt. Judiciary is a part of the conspiracy in Egypt. All of this, all the wise people, the wise persons in all over the world, they know that as well. They know what the truth in the ground in Egypt, but they still keep silent. I'm really wondering from this, and that will touch them. That will touch them at any time.
Well, Dr. Mustafa, he's asked the question, why is the international community silent? What's your answer to that?
I don't think it's silent. I think there have been a lot of condemnation last 48 hours. Germany called the Egyptian ambassador in German, the foreign minister, and they loaded the statement from the Secretary of State Kerry. I think everybody is watching what's happening. Particularly, Sisi does not say exactly what he's going to do. He doesn't have a program. He doesn't meet people. He didn't talk to the media. Is everything still really not clear, opaque? And what worries me that the judges do not take account if statements being taken under torture. It's not in their dictionary. That's why I think the judges of Egypt are a very incompetent bunch of people. They're not professional enough, and I'm willing to say this publicly. And we've got to say this openly and loudly. I am a very secular man. I'm not in any way near the Muslim Brotherhood or radical Islam, but at the same time, rule of law will not come that way.
Well, do you think that the foreign governments like the West, in the West, should take action rather than just saying they're troubled or it's challenging, should actually cut aid and put on sort of sanctions?
I don't think it will work, because in Egypt you can play nationalism, xenophobia, interference from the West and from colonial powers, and you can really stir up the street in Egypt against the West. So I think they have to play it very delicately.
They get so much money from the West. Can he really afford to do that?
They can.
I mean, if he's so independent and anti the West, why does he take all this money?
Well, they get away with it. Nasser is a hero until today, and the Egyptian pound is 6 pence, equivalent to what it was 60 years ago, 6% of its value. So they can get away with it. When you have this too much razzmatazz, media pressure, because all the media virtually are with the regime at the moment. And even the Human Rights Council in Egypt, National Human Rights Council, is run by ex-Nasser's Minister of Propaganda. I mean, it's something need to be, we got to talk about openly.
What do you think the international community should do, Tamer?
I mean, I think right now there isn't really much that can be done. I mean, I think the question of sanctions may be too quick of a knee-jerk reaction on the basis that you have preliminary courts, most of which any competent lawyer or judge or legal analyst that follows the country's judiciary system will tell you are completely meaningless. The impact and the message itself is significant. It should not be undermined. And I think that will need some form of reprimanding and questioning as to, why would somebody come out with these type of statements? Because most of the people that are, directly being impacted are those of the lower income brackets and those whose fathers, sons, brothers are being captured. So they have no idea what the legal system is. To them, it's supposed to be some form of a rule of law, which is being abused. Now, there have been, obviously, Sweden, Germany, the UK, the US have been sending their messages on Twitter and verbally, but it's clearly, they are all soft messages. I think having anyone coming out with, proposals of full-blown sanctions at this stage would be to some extent embarrassing, especially if within the next month or less, all of these judgments get overturned. For me, I mean, looking at it from an insider, an Egyptian, I would say, let's see how this gets played out generally. And I think there will be continuous pressure. And maybe in the long term, it is good that you have judges that are completely out of line, because that will then raise more and more pressure from the public. And there'll be a lot of expectations that will be put forth for when and if, but probably when, Sisi comes into control. Because this will all be part of the social agenda as to what social justice will be provided. And so long as there isn't a plan and a map for it, you will never have economic progress or stability in Egypt. And so from that perspective, I think it's also unfair to say that the Western countries are, what can they do and can't they do? I mean, you also have to look at the powers of the Gulf. A lot of the impact and the politics that's going on in the region has, to some extent, changed in the last month and a half or less since President Obama went to visit the King of Saudi Arabia. There are harsher words for Iran. There is more leniency towards Egypt. You have the UAE and the Saudi Arabian who are willing to fund and fill in gaps where necessary. So there's a lot of politics that's going on in the region. I think we're just basically at a wait-and-see phase until the elections actually do take place.
But this was like a stick in plasters, really. You're talking about 90 million people. And, I mean, how can you run a country for a year?
But I think we are in a transition period. I think it's really, to some extent, you're in a country where a month ago, people were saying, why hasn't Sisi come down? Why hasn't he said he's going to be nominating himself and running for presidency? Well, there were no presidential laws in place. That's why he didn't nominate it. Why hasn't Sisi gone down and shaken hands and spoken and discussed? Well, technically, it opens on May 3rd. Will he come out, and be full-blown?
He put his name for presidency. He should go out now. It's only 4 weeks for him to be president.
But the campaigns officially begin on May 3rd. So I think he's being overly cautious because there is a wave of popularity that exists. And I think to some extent he's staying in the background and fairly quiet, and whether it will bite back or not, but it's clear that he doesn't want to end up being overly exposed to any mistakes that will come back and bite him before he even gets to the presidency itself. And I think part of it is people are just anxious. and they've already kind of, submitted to the conclusion that he's already running the country. Nobody else is doing anything. All the institutions are just basically, have their little red phone that they pick up, and he says, do this, do that, do this. But they're really forgetting that, the complexity, the balkanization, the corporate identities that exist within what is Egypt is very complex. And to me, I think, for someone like El-Sisi, it's not going to be a walk in the park.
But he can't influence a parliamentary election.
To interrupt you, but we've just been joined actually on the phone by Jeremy Corbyn, Labour MP at Westminster, who's the MP actually for Islington North, and who has strong views on these issues of what Britain and the other Western countries should do. Welcome, Jeremy. I mean, do you think that the time has come to put sanctions on Egypt?
I'm not sure about sanctions, but I think we certainly need to be putting much greater political pressure on Egypt, because what happened was a process supported by the military removed an elected government and put another one in office, and that has been only received very muted criticism from the rest of the world. And I think there has to be some pressure on Egypt about its democratic credentials, and also close observance of the forthcoming election, and insurance that any opposition candidate does actually have a genuine ability to put their case.
I'm sorry, the line actually is not terribly good. It's sort of breaking up. I think we'll try and come back to you in a second, Jeremy. In the meantime, let me ask Mohammed Sudan, who's still there, I believe, on Skype. What do you think Muslim Brotherhood supporters are going to do when the election takes place? Will they boycott, or is there another candidate they might support? What do you think they will do?
The alliance of the democracy, or alliance for the legitimacy together, they already decided that they're going to boycott this kind of election, because they understand that this is going to be a comic election. It's a comic play. It's not a real election as we had before in the 2012. It's coming, and Sisi is coming anyway. And this guy Hamdin Sabahi, he just apart from the play. He plays his role. That's it. And we will not be apart from this kind of comic play. No, we will not participate, and we boycott already. This is the last decision.
And do you think that boycott will be followed by other people, some of the secular people as well, like the April the 6th movement? I mean, what do you think about their being banned? I mean, they've got nothing to do with your organization.
If anyone right now announced that he's going to boycott, then the Egyptian judiciary will stop them and will cancel their movement, or as they did with the April 6th, or any other oppositions. I think they're going to get the same destination for April 6th, because that way which Sisi used the Egyptian judiciary, the new Egyptian judiciary, to punish their oppositions. Then they keep silent, or if they announce, then they're going to ban them, exactly like the April 6th or the Muslim Brotherhood or whatever. Yeah. We are away from democracy system in Egypt. We are away from democracy.
Well, Dr. Mustafa, I mean, how do you compare it to the Mubarak period? Is there less democracy now than under Mubarak, or is there at least some little relic of the January 11, 2011 Arab Spring left there in Egypt?
I would say it's a bit worse, of course, because you've got hundreds of thousands being killed, but basically still the same school of post-1952 military coup, still in control of the country. So slight variations here and there, but I don't think there's much change, particularly the control of the media and judiciary, as you could see.
Your view on how it compares with Mubarak?
No, I kind of differ a little bit, because I think to say that it's exactly the same and nothing has changed then disregards the ceiling of fear that was cracked during the 2011 revolution. It completely disregards the fact that ideologies have changed and that you have a whole huge youth movement, of which, irrespective of whether movements of April 6th, are being challenged in court or not, they will continue. It also fails to determine that, many people voted with their feet, be it, January 25th, be it in the June-July protests against Morsi. I think the playing field has changed, and the individuals in and of themselves are conscious of what it is that they want, which is why having someone like Sisi come back, and if he wants, he's running obviously, and if he does win, which he will probably, it's not going to be business as usual anymore, because there will be certain things that will be expected. Otherwise, he will be destined to fail in the next year or 2 years again.
So it's part of the solution or the problem?
I don't think it's necessarily, it's never that simple, really. I mean, even the boycotting, for me, my perspective is if you want to be, the ship is sailing and it's moving forward. You either try to find a way to jump on board and find and work, it's an uphill battle, there's no doubt about it. But you either participate and work on it, or you continuously sit on the sidelines saying, this I don't like, therefore I'm not participating. It gives it validity, so I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. In these elections, you have Hamdane Sabahi, and you have El-Sisi, representative of the old regime, new face. Part of the beauty, hopefully, that one would see is that some form of an opposition is being created through Hamdane Sabahi. He may not necessarily be the right leader in any shape, way, or form, but having an opposition, what that means is going forth and having an election where you have 20, 30% of the people actually said no to Sisi and said yes to Hamdane. That sends a message that we have, yes, lost another, battle, but the war still goes on. And it also sends a message to the other side that there is a minority you have to deal with, be them the Muslim Brotherhood, be them the seculars who feel that we're still heading the wrong direction, and political parties need to find their space to work hard. But throwing in the towel and saying we're continuously going to boycott because this is not going to happen or we don't like this, I think it's just to some extent turning your back on the lives.
Well, Mohammed Sudan, the accusation is you're turning your back on the ship that's moving.
Yeah, it's a movie. It's really a movie. And we're not expecting any further progress after the election. Then this guy, Sisi, he is still belong to the military regime. Either he's with the uniform or without. He still belong to the military regime. And they think that they get back whatever they lost it for 1 year, which is the era of Morsi. That was the plan. That was the conspiracy from the beginning, and I think that's the process of the election. Really, I'm really upset because Mrs. Ashton said that she's going to send a team to observe this kind of play or comic election. That will not add any kind of legitimacy to the process of the election, because
on that note, I think we have to end. I'm afraid the time has run out. I'm sure we'll be able to come back to the issue of the elections as we get closer to them. We've really reached the end of this episode of Analysis. So thank you all my guests, and of course thank you at home for watching. Please tune in again for future discussions, and don't forget you can always keep up with the discussion by following us on Twitter at the address below, or by following Islam Channel Current Affairs on Facebook. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.